Welcome to Raising Unstoppable Teens podcast. I'm Dr. Kimberly Shear, teen breakthrough expert and host of the show. And I am so delighted to spend the next 30 minutes with our expert, Olivia Parr-Rud. She has worked in corporate for over 30 years, and she is a self-love mentor, which I love, and an expert in Protirement. So please help me welcome Olivia Parr-Rud to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So tell us a little bit about what does Protirement mean?
Well, that's a great question. So I think years ago, people would retire and then they would just kind of shrink back and do nothing or have a very passive life. And a friend of mine and I were working together trying to plan our future a few years ago and coaching each other. And we wanted to create a visual for our retirement. And I said, I don't want to retire. I want to pro-tire, which to me is retirement with purpose. And I think there's many people now that are of our age. I'm almost 70 and I feel like I'm 25 and I just figured out what I want to do when I grow up. So my passion is helping people around retirement age to maybe find that purpose that they had and heal any self-love issues so they can really become who they were always meant to be.
I love that. Purpose is so important for many of us. And I, of course, am hold strong beliefs in that in helping teens to discover their purpose. And what I find is that it's not always so easy. And we are subjected, all of us, to social conditioning. And for many of us, what do I want to say? We kind of go on the logic path and really think with our heads, and we kind of tap out of our heart space or our inner knowing and really tapping into what our purpose is and what our gifts and talents are that we were born with to contribute to that purpose. So with teens and with those that are pro-tiring, how do you help people to discover their purpose when it can be kind of buried?
That's really a good question. And I will say I have 3 kids. They're all between 35 and 41 right now. And I don't think I was as good at this back then. And I think now I've helped them since they become adults. My youngest is definitely the farthest ahead as far as her honing her intuition. So that is really important. And to me in business, I could see how a lot of linear thinking is getting automated or outsourced. So if we can't tap in and get those $1 million ideas or different ways of doing things that our competitors don't think of, using intuition and creative thinking and systems thinking, we really can't be competitive. So to me, that's where the competitive advantage is the better you are at doing that sort of right brain intuitive thinking, the more successful you'll be. And if we could get teenagers to engage in that, because it is natural when we're really little. And I think, like you said, it kind of gets programmed out of us. And if we spend too much time on a screen, we're not really engaging in just creative thinking. So yeah, I think it's really important for kids. And one of the ways I did it, it's harder now with screens being so available, but I didn't have any TV during the week at all. They could watch TV on Saturday morning, I think, was the only time I let the kids watch television. And when all the video games started coming out, I didn't want to get them. They finally ended up, I think, getting Game Boys eventually in high school. But it was so much easier back then. And it's hard. But I think we can maybe inspire kids in a way to spend more time just being in their right brain and creative thinking.
I love that, and I would agree. I have to say with my girls, um, same thing with the TV. And then for a while, we didn't even have TV
Nice. Yeah.
because I just, it was just again another distraction and taking them away. And I
Well,
really, Mhm.
I forgot to mention too, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that in the winter I had a room where there was just art supplies everywhere. So they would go play in there, and in the summer they were mostly outside. So
Mhm.
it's not like you can deny something and then expect them, to figure it out. Giving them something positive to do is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love that because that's giving them this space. And that's what I was going to say is really when we're not distracted and we have kind of the room, if you will,
Mm,
to just play, just do other things that strike us in the moment.
yeah.
That really does allow for new insights and
Hmm.
creative ideas to uh, become more evident or more to the surface, if you will. So it's important that I think that we're not so bombarded with that. And of course, now it's even tougher because of, the internet and so forth,
Well,
right
and
there.
my son went to California Institute of the Arts,
Hmm.
and that was right around the time where an MBA seemed like the most practical degree. And
Hmm.
then a book came out that said, no, an art degree is actually more valuable to companies. For the reason I said earlier, that in it, everything's being automated, and it's the creative thinkers that are actually wanted by business. So even if you want to be practical about it, it's a good idea.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for making that point. That is a very good point.
Yeah.
So, what is it? Is the minimizing TV time, or what is it that uh, I know you have stated that annoyed your kids back then, but now they're
Oh,
very grateful for?
no, this is funny. And I don't know if other parents, but I was raised, this is how my mother raised me. It was about using proper grammar.
Hmm.
So I would, if my daughter would say, me and Nell want to go to the store, I wouldn't correct her. I would just say, I don't understand you. And then she'd go like, Nell and I want to go to the store. And I go, okay, or the mall or whatever it was. So I really tried to help them in a non-judgmental but a kind of a fun way to
Hmm.
get their language correct, because I knew they could talk any way they wanted with their friends, but when they needed that neural pathway for a job interview or to be a write something important, they would have it. And I'm amazed, they're all really good writers, and my son runs a business and he has the best grammar, and he said, I used to hate it, but I'm really grateful now.
Wow, that's nice. It's nice that they sometimes it takes that. They realize it later on, right? And then we get our kudos.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not always easy. Many people aren't native English speakers.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. It's just something I think to be aware of, and it can help kids and even us.
Yep.
Sometimes I'm trying to figure out what's the right spelling of a word. Is it
Yes.
affect or effect?
Mhm.
But I always try to keep learning about that.
Mhm. I love that. And the other thing that you mentioned too that I think is a really good point, well, two actually, is the fact that you kind of addressed it not in a lecture format, but kind of a question like, I don't understand you. I mean, I guess that's a
Yeah.
statement, but it's kind of masked as a question so that they, have to kind of think for themselves and
Right.
restate what they said differently.
Hmm.
So I thought that was really cool because in a way I feel like that is a way to guide them. And
Yeah.
kids, teens, if it's more of a guidance rather than being told, uh, one, it helps them think critically, and two, you don't conjure up all the resistance, right? Because
Right.
they're more open to receiving what you had to say. And the other thing I really loved, and I don't know if you want to expand on this a little bit, but was just without judgment.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really like that. And
I
how
tried
does
to
the
make it fun, just
right.
like it was like a joke, but I knew their pathways were being created in their
Mhm.
brain, so I didn't care.
That's right. That's the parental part, right? So
Right.
I love just the way that you in that scenario handled it. So,
Mm,
and what do you
thanks.
think about that, the judgment piece and the self-love piece, and how do those two maybe come together?
Well, with kids, it's there's a really interesting way of helping kids. When I just had my first child, I remember taking a parenting class from this. My girlfriend and I signed up, and we were the only ones that showed up. And we just were at a restaurant, and this young woman was telling us things. But she said something that was so profound, and I tried to use this all my child rearing years, and that is to not judge. So let's say my son or daughter drew a picture. I wouldn't come in and say, that's a nice picture. Or if somebody's wearing a piece of clothing, I wouldn't say, that's a nice shirt, because that sort of puts me in the role of a judge.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is, I love that painting,
Mm-hmm.
or I love that shirt. You must feel really good about that. If it's a child, I would say that. Like, you must be really proud of that. I really love it. And that lets them see that they're the judge of themselves, and I'm not criticizing, or especially with something like art or something creative
Mm-hmm.
that, lets them feel like, oh, okay, I'm the one that gets to decide. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, it does. And I really, um, yeah, I like that because that's actually, again, allowing, um, well, two things that pop for me with that. One is that sometimes we think that judgment is only negative,
Yeah.
but
Oh, right.
judgment goes the same way, and it's just as limiting.
Mm-hmm.
For example, with some of the students that I see, um, if I were to judge, like, I don't say it this way, but I make that help them make their own connections. But if I
Mm-hmm.
were to say, you're really smart at math, let's say,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
then
yeah.
that's kind of putting that bar there. And if they don't yet believe it,
Mm.
now they're trying to please me and they get scared or pressured because what if they don't measure up to that positive judgment? So
Interesting.
that's what I'm trying to say, is it can be just as limiting. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that with the art, you're still acknowledging them
Mm-hmm.
and you're giving them the freedom and the space for them to feel good about what they've created. And that's
Yeah.
bottom line. That's what's going to carry them, and right, and is if they have that in their hearts, that
Mm-hmm.
won't go away,
Yeah.
regardless of what
Yeah.
we say. So
Yeah. And I try to do it with adults too. I always maybe say something to the cashier, because they don't get a lot of positive feedback during the day many times, right? And I'll just say, oh, I love your shirt, or I love your hair, or something. And it just lights them up. Where if I say, that's a nice shirt, it's just a little different energy, right? So
mhm.
it
Yeah,
helps.
I like that. So going back to your 30 years in corporate and being a business leader, how is managing teens or being a parent, what are the similarities between that and being a leader in business, managing employees, for example?
It's quite similar, and actually I think becoming more similar today, in that business is coming around to this. So I feel like years ago in business, there might be this top down fear based leadership
Mhm.
style, and that worked in very simple businesses. And we know families are not simple. So I think this always works in families where there's a choice between being a fear based parent and a respect based parent.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of back and forth with my husband, because he was raised with fear. He's passed away now, but we were married for 29 years, and he had a very fear-based family of origin, and mine was more respect-based. And actually, I didn't have a lot of parenting, because my father died when I was little and my mother was working, so I was on my own a lot. But I had to learn to make a lot of my own decisions.
Mhm.
And I think it made me more prepared for the world. So I tried to raise my kids and also manage people with the, the concept that they could figure it out. I might tell them what I want or what I need,
Mhm.
but I let them figure out how to get there, and
Mhm.
I might guide them. And sometimes I have to judge, just like with a child. I might say, I think that's dangerous, or whatever. There's times when that's important, and that might happen in business as well. But I would always try to do it really respectfully and try to find what I like about whatever it is.
Mhm.
But really, it's more about empowering people,
Mhm.
families and employees,
Mhm.
giving them the resources, giving them your trust, having really good communication, and then let them make mistakes sometimes. Obviously, with parenting, you have to have a container where things are off limits, and that was certainly true. But I tried to make it as little as possible so that when I set those limits, they respected them.
Mhm.
And I let them make mistakes and, um, have those stumbles that I knew were going to happen. But I told them what I thought might happen, but I would let them have that freedom. And in business, that's so important, to let people make mistakes, because sometimes that's where the best ideas come from. And I guess you could say that might happen in families too. Maybe we learn something from our kids. And today I learn a lot from my kids. So I'm really glad I gave them that training in how to be a critical thinker.
It's really important for sure. And you said so much that my brain's going ding ding ding. Um,
Oh, fun.
but I love the whole respect, coming from respect. And when I think about teens, sometimes in families, and well, I think for many of us, when we're in a situation that's challenging,
Mhm.
we don't see where we're standing in our own way, or we just see that. And
Yeah.
it's hard to see maybe some other possibilities. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes we can assume that our teens, because they may not say anything, aren't really aware of what's going on. And
Mm.
teens are very aware.
Ah.
And they'll, if they're asked for their feedback, or even if they offer it without being asked, it's astonishing how accurate they really are. And so when I think
Mm.
about how this goes with respect, um, what came to me was, I'm a big proponent of having family meetings so that
Yes.
everyone has a voice. You brought up communication, and you may have to tell
Mhm.
employees what it is that you want or whatever, but that's clear. You're setting a standard, you're setting an expectation. And oftentimes as parents, we
Mhm.
just assume our teens know it, or we've told them over and over again. But when you have a family meeting, you're able to go over some of those expectations and rules, but everybody has a voice. And
Mhm.
even if we disagree with our teens, the fact that we're listening, the fact that we took time out to have this meeting as a family, sends a message of
Mm.
how valuable they are and their perspective, even if we disagree. And I think it helps with that respect factor, even if they might be a little bit rebellious. So yeah.
Well, and I'd love to share, to expand on the meeting idea, because I didn't do this, but I think it would be really interesting, and I bet others have, which is where in a business, you get together and then you say, here's the vision of the company. You could have a vision for your family. It could be that, you're working towards saving for a vacation, or something even, you want to have a nonprofit or help a charity or some kind of family endeavor that pulls everybody together towards something greater than themselves.
Mhm.
And I just think that would be a really fun way to build family unity, and have it where you're gathering not to always hear what's wrong, but like just go towards something good.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, just the communication and having teens involved, because their perspective is oftentimes very on point. And I don't know, I
Mhm.
have been surprised by some
Yeah.
of the insights for sure. So, and I just want to mention in my book, Unstoppable Teens, in the chapters, it always ends with a front for ideas to take you from a me to a we mindset.
Mm. Oh,
And
yeah.
because I feel like that is really important. So I love that idea of the family having a vision, or thinking out as a family unit of how each
Yeah.
person can kind of contribute really to the greater good, or outside of themselves. I love that. I love that, which
Mhm.
actually can tie into purpose as well, which is what we started with on the
Yeah,
interview, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
True.
that is so cool. Let's see some other questions I had. You kind of touched on this. Well, I was going to go with the mistakes, and if we have time, we'll come back to that. But I wanted to get your insight or your perspective on how can we teach our children and teens empathy and tolerance.
I think the best way, if it's possible, is to take them on trips and visit other parts of the country, even other parts of the world, if that's possible.
Mhm,
Because I think when children are exposed to areas that have deep poverty,
mhm,
they don't even know that's possible, right? And
mhm,
I think it gives them empathy, and it also allows them to be appreciative of what they have and maybe want to take on a cause to help that.
mhm,
And I also think if we raise them with respect, in a way, we are role modeling empathy. So a child that is totally fear based, that empathy might get split out of them or suppressed, and they may not even have access to it. So that's where I really like having that heart opening empathy as a way of actually leading and expressing empathy so that they role model that.
mhm. Role modeling that's really the ticket, because that's
Mhm.
what our children, our youth, are really paying attention to. And that's why they call
Yeah.
us on our hypocrisy, really, because we say one thing,
Yeah.
but if we're doing another, they see the incongruency in that. So another thing why I appreciate teens, because they will call you out on it,
Yeah.
So
Right. And yeah. And you were saying how they come up with things that are so surprising. And I think it is because to some extent they haven't been programmed as much as we are, and we're seeing kids that are inventing things that are solving huge problems. And I love the fact that they see us in our bullshit, right? And
mhm.
do call us out and hold us accountable. So it's great.
That's right. And I like that too, about holding us accountable, because as much as we can think that we're honest with ourselves, we still have some of the subconscious programming and conditioning that we're not aware of, that might be playing in the background. And
Hmm.
we're not as honest as we can be. I don't think we're intentionally, sometimes, but intentionally, it's not always about not being honest. Sometimes we really think we are being honest, and we just can't see it because it's our own blind spots. And so when we're called on it, I love that,
Right.
because you can't change what you don't know. So it helps us to, if we choose to reflect on it, and then if we kind of agree with what our teens are saying and see that incongruency, then we can work towards changing it, and definitely um, own own our responsibility with some of our choices within a
Hmm.
given mindset as well. So um, I love
Yeah.
that. So okay, so you, I know, think it's great to let our kids, teens, make mistakes, and
Hmm.
be able to have their own choices, obviously not risking their safety. But so can you expound
Yeah.
a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think when when my kids were little, I would always give them choices, even when they were tiny. I remember my son was at 1 or 2, and I'd say, "Do you want apple juice or orange juice?" I tried to empower him always, right? And then later on, I would ask for if they had a problem, I would ask them to come up with a suggestion for the solution, and sometimes, I would give them a solution they didn't like, and I'd say, "Okay, well, I'm going to let you choose," knowing that if they went with their decision, they might have an error or, regret it, waste money, whatever. Nothing of, like you said, that would be dangerous, but often it was really spending money on things that were the decisions that I probably could have overridden and didn't. But I think they get smarter about how to manage themselves when they have these real life consequences. If we keep them from real life consequences during their whole childhood, they can be very ill equipped as adults.
Mhm.
And I remember my son, when he was in high school, a friend of his had really high controlling parents,
Mhm.
and this kid got his driver's license, and all he wanted to do was drive really fast. And
Oh.
my son knew enough to not get in the car with him, and he
Mhm.
talked other kids not to get into not getting in the car with him this one day. And the guy did have an accident, and nobody got hurt, thankfully.
Good.
But that was his wake up call because
Mhm.
he, just wanted power.
Mhm.
So I think that's a good reason to let him make mistakes.
Mhm. Absolutely, because that's the strongest way to learn, I think, is through
Yeah.
natural consequences. And of course, as parents, we're not going to allow them to really put themselves into, high risk situations. Unfortunately, sometimes they still do they do that themselves. But even with the
Hmm.
kind of lower risk, if you will, it's still really scary for parents. Um, but
Yeah.
I love what you said about empowering, because if we are rescuing them or prevent them from really what I would say experimenting or exploring, um,
Yeah.
because they make a choice and then they're going to learn kind of what happens. So that's what I mean by that. Um, then they're not learning to trust themselves. And that, then
Mm.
you talk about the fear base, as they get older and older, that could really be seeding more self-doubt, more fear, and they get
Mhm.
further and further away from really trusting, again, their intuition, or, you know, really trusting who they are, and how they can show up. So
Yeah.
I love that about, it's important, even though it's hard as a
Well,
parent.
and and sometimes if it is, say, physically dangerous, like, I remember my mother being nervous when I wanted to drive to see a friend for 3 hours and I was in college.
Mhm.
But I also think we can do kind of, I think of it as angelic protection. I just surround them with white light and just try to trust that they'll be safe.
Right.
So that's another way I can let go of that. Because
Mhm.
I think I shared with you when we spoke the other day about this quote I came up with when my kids were teenagers, which is, true power is the ability to relinquish control. And it was that I always tried to give them the freedom, as long as I knew it wasn't dangerous, so that when I did, they respected it, because I wasn't
Mhm.
saying no all the time. I
Right.
was trying to let them live a pretty free life to the point
Mhm.
where then they respected those limits that I set.
It's beautiful. I really like that. So, and I
Thanks.
love that quote. It's one I've come across, something similar, but I don't know who it was. But it was, sometimes it's more courageous to surrender than it is to
Mm,
hang on, and really discerning when it's time to let go too
yeah.
is a process in and of itself. So, um,
Right. The
but
Buddhist non-attachment.
yes, yes, I love that. And then the other thing I just wanted to add with the mistakes, you know, we have such a variety of personalities, but there are those teens that tend to be, um, the good, semi are pretty much obedient kids, however you want to describe it. And one of the things that I think is important as parents is to realize, because then we just expect that kind of level of behavior or thought from them, because we're used to it, for one, and so we just kind of carry on. And then when they do maybe make a choice that just makes us cringe, or they make a mistake, they put so much pressure on themselves. And I think it's important as parents that, I guess, really, that to remember, even good kids make mistakes, and it's a good thing, because that's how they're learning very valuable lessons. And I think sometimes we forget
that the world doesn't fall apart if they make a mistake. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Depends who you talk to, but no, I'm joking. No, it does not fall apart. So anyway, so tell me again what you're up to, what people, if they want to learn more about what you do and learn more about Protirement. I love that, by the way. I think, and I love your mission. I love it. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, so I have a 5-day love all of yourself 5-day challenge. If anybody's interested in just beefing up their self-love, it's www.love and then the number 5 and then day.com. And then you can go to my website, oliviapr.com, and there's a bunch of things there for free, ebooks and all kinds of stuff. I'm still building it, so I don't have all my blogs up yet, but you can get to know more about me and certainly reach out. I'm going to be developing some online courses and doing coaching, so I'd love to have your contact information. If you want any information on that, please register for my mailing list. And I'd love to connect with any of you that would like to.
That's awesome. And I visited your new website, and maybe you don't have everything up, but it's beautiful, and you really do offer quite a bit. I mean, I was actually excited looking at your new website. So I do encourage our listeners to check it out for sure. So absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I built it myself.
Wow.
Which was so much fun. I really, all my life, was frustrated with working with other people, because I would have these ideas and now I can just go in and do them all. And the technology is pretty easy. I'm using Kajabi and it's fun. So I'm getting to use my left and right brain.
Nice. Yeah. Which is part of what you're all about, right? That creative side, and then
heart and head.
Yes. Being in alignment is so important. But well, thank you so very much for being on the show. It was absolutely delightful. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Till next time, we'll say goodbye. But next week, stay tuned for another episode.